Hi, I'm Mike Dennis, and welcome back to part 7 of this exciting series of videos telling my life story, especially focusing on my life as a professional musician, as a pianist. Now, where we left off in part 6, we were all the way up to 2006, and I had been knocking around Key West for about 15 years. With really no luck. You may remember I had opened my club, and that stayed open for 2 or 3 years, and then I had gone to Honduras, and and I'm bouncing around playing little gigs here around Key West, a night here and a night there, or a week here, and I couldn't catch on. I couldn't get any footing in Key West. So I was very disappointed. Very disappointed. And then by this time, I think, as you may remember from the last episode, I was playing poker. I was going out to Las Vegas 2 weeks out of every month to play poker. I had started playing 10 years earlier in '96 and worked my way up to going out to play more or less at the professional level in Las Vegas for 2 weeks out of every month at the Mirage and later at the Bellagio. Now, it's now December of 2006, and I decide to move to Las Vegas. I have to back up here just a minute. In August of 2006, I was still going out there 2 weeks a month, and I got a call from, guess who? Rex Allen Jr., a blast from the past, whom I hadn't seen since like 1980, and when I used to go on the road with him and tour out of Nashville. Anyway, Rex now, at that time in 2006, was living in Las Vegas. And as it turns out, not far from where I lived, maybe 5-10 minutes from where I lived. And he was sort of semi-retired. He was going out playing occasional dates here and there. And he called me up, wanted to know if I wanted to do some dates with him in around Arizona and Utah. So I did. He put together a little band, and I was a piano player, and we went out and did these dates. Then in October, we went to Wilcox, Arizona. Now, Wilcox is where his father was from, Rex Allen Sr. Wilcox is a small town not far from the Mexican border in southern Arizona. And Rex Sr. came from there, and he never forgot that he was from Wilcox. He always used to tell everybody what a great town it was. I think he called it the Center of Culture and Education or something like that. I forget. But anyway, he had this spiel that he gave about Wilcox at every opportunity. And Wilcox never forgot him, even after he left, and never came back there to live. But he left, and they started Rex Allen Days many years ago, and he came to play Rex Allen Days every October. Rex Allen Sr., this is. And then until Rex Allen Jr. took it over, sometime around maybe in the 70s, or right around the time when I joined him. And Rex had been doing Wilcox every year since 1980. I had done it twice with him, and since I left him, he's still doing it every year. All right, so 2006 rolls around, and Rex and I get back together. We do a few dates in Arizona and Utah, and then Wilcox is coming up at the beginning of October, and we do that. So it was during this period from I think when I was out in Wilcox, when I happened to see on my computer that I went to a website called onehitwonder.com. I think it's no longer a website, but at the time it was up and running. And I looked at all these one-hit wonders. It was just a list of songs and the artist and the year that the song was popular, and then that was all you needed to know, because the one-hit wonder was never heard from again. And I looked down this list, and there's Bumble Boogie by Mike Dennis. I was on this list of onehitwonders.com, right up there with Norman Greenbaum and Spiral Staircase and all the rest of them, and even though, as you may remember, back a few episodes ago, I never did what it took. I never took that last step to get the blanket airplay in Nashville, and then as a consequence of which, I would have gotten a record deal from Tony Brown and RCA. and it would have been a national hit, and I would have truly been a one-hit wonder. But instead, I just got played a little bit around Nashville, a few radio stations around Nashville, and somehow because of that, I wound up on this list on this website of one-hit wonders. Anyway, I thought that was a pretty good laugh. So, and then not long after that, I saw copies of Bumble Boogie, 40 for the 45, going for $75. $75. I wanted to say, hey, I got about 50 of them left over from when the record was out. You know, I'll sell them to you for $75 a piece. But anyway, in November. So in 2006, I moved to Las Vegas in December of 2006. I got a house there. It's a nice house out right on Lake Sahara, out in the western section of Las Vegas. And from there, I went down to Bellagio. Every day I drove down Desert Inn Road, or Durango Desert Inn Road, to Bellagio every day, and played poker at the Bellagio from about maybe 11 o'clock in the morning until maybe 4 o'clock in the afternoon. That was it. And I was winning. I mean, I wasn't getting wealthy, but I was winning. I was beating the game. And let me tell you, in poker, only 10% of the players who ever attempt poker are winning players. So the other 90% were feeding me and other such players like myself who were winning players. And if you're going to be a professional, you have to be a winning player. You can't be a losing player for obvious reasons. Okay, so I moved to Las Vegas because I forgot to mention that in 2005, early 2005, I'd moved my mom out to Las Vegas because she had developed Alzheimer's, and there were no good assisted living facilities. She needed professional care, and there was no such facility in Seneca Falls, and there was certainly none in Key West. And there was one, I think, in Key West, but it looked like something out of a Stephen King novel. I certainly wasn't going to put her there. So I researched Las Vegas, and I found some very nice assisted living facilities, and I lined one up for her. And in 2005, I moved her out there. Now I'm going out there two weeks out of the month to play poker, and I see her every single day before I play poker. We have lunch every day, and I bring her back to the facility, and I say, I'll see you tomorrow. I kiss her goodbye, and I go to play poker. Next day, same thing. And then when I go back to Key West, she's all distraught because I'm not going to be around for 2 weeks, right? All right, well, in December 2006, I'm beginning to realize that there's nothing to keep me in Key West. And my mom is out there, the poker is out there. So I just moved out there in Las Vegas. And so I did, and I got this nice house, which is only about a half a mile from where my mom was. And I continued to have lunch with her every day. We ate at Mimi's, and not Mimi's, Marie Callender's, which is a little family restaurant nearby. We ate there every day. And Marie Callender's, by the way, I found out was Marie Callender herself was the basis for the novel and the later film Mildred Pierce, which starred Joan Crawford, and the later miniseries which starred Kate Winslet, about a woman who leaves her husband and opens up a restaurant. Anyway, and serves pies. And that's what Marie Callender was. It was a good restaurant. They had a lot of pies. All right, so anyway, so I'm having lunch with my mom every day. I'm playing poker. I'm winning money, and entering a few tournaments, winning a few bucks here and there, and everything is going copacetic. 2007 rolls around, same thing. In October of that year, I go to Wilcox with Rex Allen Jr., but I'm living in Las Vegas now full time, playing poker year round. And 2008, same thing. I go to Wilcox in October of 2008 with Rex Allen Jr. 2009, in May of 2009, May 3rd to be exact, my mom passed away, 4 days short of her 96th birthday. God bless her, and I hope I have that gene. I really do, because my dad died at 64. But anyway, my mom passed away in May of 2009, and it was very sad. And I went back and we had the funeral, and it was just very, very sad time. All right, then in August of 2009, now I might add that from May 2009 until December of 2010, about a year and a half, will turn out to be probably the most turbulent year and a half of my life. Or I should say maybe not turbulent, but certainly event-filled, let's put it that way. In May 2009, my mom passes away. In August 2009, I come back from the Bellagio, and I look at my computer, check my email, and there's an email from a publisher who wants to publish my novel. I had written, you may remember from earlier episodes, that I had written 2 novels, the second one of which I thought was really good, but I didn't bother, I tried getting them published, but I got nowhere. So then I wrote a 3rd novel, and I felt that I had built my chops up, my writing chops, up to the point where I could write a 3rd novel and perhaps expect to get it published. And nothing happened with that either. But then in the mid-2000s or late 2000s, I started submitting it again, that 3rd novel. It was called The Take. And I got a bite from a publisher in August of 2009 who wanted to publish it. And I wrote back, I said, yes, of course, I accept, and I accepted their offer. And then as soon as I clicked send on that email, I realized that I had absolutely nothing to promote my novel with, no website, no promotional mechanism of any kind whatsoever. And I realized I was going to have to get busy on it. So I simply never went back to the poker room. And it surprised me at how unceremonial it was. I mean, I just quit playing poker like that and never went back. And I cut off my source of income, yes, but like I said, I had some other investments, and I was making a modest income from those, very modest, but it was enough to pay my bills and slide by. And it was enough to allow me to stay home every day, get a website together, and write another novel. So I got this friend of mine, her name is Leslie Michaelis. She was what you might call very good with computers, and she helped me get a website together. And the website was up, and I started promoting my novel, The Take, and I started trying to get book signings and this kind of thing going. And I went to conferences, and I went to BoucherCon in Indianapolis in October of 2009, and that was my first writers conference that I went to, and I didn't like it at all. I mean, I felt like I've heard a comedian say this one time. I felt like the world was a tuxedo and I was a pair of brown shoes. And that's how I felt. I mean, nobody wanted to talk to me. I couldn't get it. You could tell who the writers were. They were all the attractive slim ones, and the readers, the book buyers were all the heavyset overweight ones. So I kept trying to get into this group of writers, and they would muscle me out with the elbows, and they didn't want to talk to me because they didn't know who I was and they didn't want to know. All right, anyway, I was very disappointed with that. But all was not lost. I continued to write my next novel, and I polished that off in 2 or 3 months, and it came to me. It was a rock and roll novel that I wanted to do. I had wanted to do it at first, for my first novel, but I didn't want to just shoot my load and say, well, and have everybody say, okay, so you wrote a musician novel, now what are you going to do? I wanted to show that I could write crime fiction or some kind of fiction, and the first 2 novels were not crime, but the third one, The Take, was definitely noir fiction, and that was the avenue I wanted to pursue. But I had to get this rock and roll novel out of my system first. So I wrote that, and it was about a guy, it's called Cadillac's Comin, about a one-hit wonder, ironically, who recorded for Sun Records back in the 1950s. And Sun was the original rock and roll record label. They had recorded Elvis Presley, his first few records, Carl Perkins, Jerry Lee Lewis, Roy Orbison, Johnny Cash. They'd recorded all these people and many more. It was really where rock and roll was born, in the Sun Record studios. Don't believe all that bullshit about Cleveland and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which is bullshit. It should have been in Memphis, because Memphis is the home of rock and roll, the birthplace of rock and roll. The Sun Studios are still there, and they do. It's a tourist attraction, but they also are a functioning studio today. in any case, I wrote this book about this guy who recorded for Sun, and I wisely I called the Sun record company today, and I spoke with John Singleton, who was at that time was running the show at Sun, and I told him what I was doing, and I ran down a plot of the book to him. I sent a copy of the manuscript to him. He read it, and he said I wanted their permission to use the Sun logo on the cover of the book, and he gave me the permission, provided that I mention it in the opening credits of where I list the publication date and all that kind of stuff. Mention that I use this Sun record label by permission, and so on, which of course I gladly agreed to, and so I put the cover I put the Sun record label on the cover, and I put the book out. It didn't do too well. I didn't expect it to, because let's face it, who wants to read about that stuff, right? But anyway, I thought it was a pretty good book, and if you like that era, I strongly recommend it for you, because it's very atmospheric, very atmospheric. All right, so that was in 2009, and then in November of 2009, right about the time I'm finishing up Cadillac's Comin, I meet a woman named Maya, and Maya and I were attracted to each other. We started dating, and we became heavily attracted to each other, so much so that in February she moved in with me. In April we became engaged, and then in May we got married, and that was another big mistake. The marriage lasted about 6 months. I won't go into it, but suffice it to say that it was just a mistake. But while we were married in May, we got married, by the way, in Key West. That was her idea, not mine. I thought we might get married out on the patio of our house overlooking the lake or something like that in Las Vegas. But she wanted to get married in Key West because she had never been there. She knew that I had been there, and she wanted me to show her around and see the town. So I thought that was okay. So we got married in Key West. A good friend of mine, Sandy Taylor, she's a judge there. She married us. I had several friends of mine from Key West show up. Sally Towns even came all the way from New Mexico to video the wedding, and we got married on the beach right outside what was it? Anyway, it was on the beach right down from Salute. Anyway, we got married on the beach there, and it was a great wedding. And the next morning we got up and we walked outside, and we were staying in the Casa Marina Hotel, which is this big old style hotel, grand hotel on the water in Key West. And we started walking down Reynolds Street, which is the street that it's located on. And we walked down Reynolds Street, and we're looking at the houses and walking around, and here's a house for sale. And she goes, this is for sale. Let's look. We walk up to the front door. It's a glass front door, and we look through. There's nobody in there, and we knocked. There's no answer, and we could see in. It looked very nice. We could see all the way through. They had glass doors opening up out onto the patio, and we could see out on the patio the vegetation out back, and it looked very, very nice. So I took down the number of the realtor, and I said, why don't we call the realtor and see what they want for it? And she said, okay. So we get back to the hotel, and I called the realtor, and the realtor gave me a price and said, do you want to go look at it? And I said, well, I'll let you know. So I told Maya, and I said, you want to go look at it? I said, we could maybe move here from Las Vegas, because at the time, remember, I quit playing poker. My mom had passed away, and there was really nothing more for me in Las Vegas. Now moving back here with this beautiful woman that I was crazy in love with, back to Key West, it might invigorate me. It might invigorate me and get me up off my ass, try to get some gigs, and try to get back into the Key West music scene, and especially if we were living in this beautiful house. So I asked her, I said, "Do you want to live in Key West?" And she said, "Well, I don't know. It's an island." I said, "Well, yeah, what's wrong with that?" And she told me that when, in her first marriage, she was married to this guy who was in the military, and he was stationed on Guam, and she really felt isolated out there. I said, "Well, shit, Guam. I think the goddamn Guam is 2,000 miles from Tahiti. No wonder here in Key West, you just drive for 3 hours and you're in Miami with shopping centers. You can drive, you don't have to fly." And she said, "I don't know, it's an island, and I don't know if they have everything here that I want." And I said, anything, believe me, Key West is like, it has big city amenities with a small town feel. And if there's something that isn't here that you want, then you can go to Miami and they'll have it. So, she said, "I don't know." And she was just, she really wanted to stay in Las Vegas. What she wanted to do was move to Salt Lake City, which is where her kids lived. She had 6 kids, and all of them but one lived in Salt Lake City. They were all adults, and many with their own families, and they all lived in Salt Lake City. So I said, "Yeah, but there's no way I'm living in Utah, because Utah has a state income tax, and I will not live any place where they have a state income tax. Not since I left Louisiana, which was the last place I lived that had a state income tax." So anyway, we were kind of at a stalemate there. So I knew we weren't going to live in Key West. So then the marriage ended in October, late October 2010, just a few months later. And so it was, like I said, it was probably for the best. And it really had nothing to do with my wanting to live in Key West and her wanting to live in Salt Lake City. That was really not the issue, because we probably could have stayed in Las Vegas and driven to Salt Lake City periodically, and that would have satisfied her, and that would have been okay with me. But in any case, we split up and got divorced in November of 2010. December of 2010, late November of 2010, I flew back to Key West, contacted a realtor, went around, looked at houses, and wound up buying the house on Reynolds Street, which I had fallen in love with. So I went back to Las Vegas, packed up my stuff, and had it moved to Key West, and I made the drive from Las Vegas all the way to Key West. And I remember pulling around on US 1, turning left onto South Roosevelt Boulevard, driving down by the ocean. I mean, it felt great knowing I was coming back home to Key West. I really felt good. I felt like it was going to open back up to me. I really did. And then that was December of 2010. That January, the next month, January 2011, I go out with my good friend Paul Topino and his girlfriend Graciela, and with the 3 of us go out to I think it was the 951. It was either 951 or 915. They had 2 places in Key West with those names, and I always getting them confused. This was the one up on Caroline Street, Steakhouse, 951 I think it was. We went there, we didn't have a steak, we just went and sat in the bar, had a few drinks, and Paul says, "We got to get you fixed up with somebody." And he turns to Graciela and he says, "How about Ileana?" And they said, "Do you know Ileana?" And I'd heard of Ileana Ros-Lehtinen. I said, "You mean Ros-Lehtinen?" Meaning she was our congresswoman at the time. And he said, "No, not her. The Ileana from Key West." And I said, "No, I don't know her." So he says to Graciela, "Why don't you call her and see if she'll do anything, if she'll come over?" Well, it turns out, I later found out that Ileana, she did come over, but I later found out that she had promised to go out with Paul's sister that night to go somewhere else. And Paul's sister had stood her up, and she was all dressed up, ready to go out. And when the phone rang, and it was Graciela saying, "Paul and I are over here with a friend of Paul's, and we're here at 951. Why don't you come over and have a drink with us?" So she said, "Okay, great," because she was all dressed up. And now she has somewhere to go, right? So she was over there in about 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and so she walked in, and Paul introduced us, and we got along pretty well. And a few minutes into our drink, Paul and Graciela said, "We're going to go. We'll leave you guys here." So they leave, and so I'm sitting here with Ileana. Ileana's got her keys on the bar, and it was a big key ring, a key holder thing about like this, with a key ring with maybe 75 keys on it. I mean, it was unbelievable. I like to say she looked like the janitor from the Empire State Building, you know. And there's all these millions of keys. And I said, why do you have all these keys on your key ring? And she said, well, you know, they're keys for one thing or another. I said, you know, you only need 2 keys, your house key and your car key, and that's it. The only other keys, if you need any other keys for one reason or another, you can carry them separately for one-time use. But the only keys you need to carry with you at all times are your house and your car keys. So I picked up the key ring, and I said, for example, I held up a key with the rest of it dangling. Do you know what this key is for? And she said, no. So I took it off the key ring and set it over here. Do you know what this key is for? No. Set it over here. Do you know what this key is for? No, no, no. And she didn't know what any of them for until we came to her house key. She said, yeah, that's my house key. And then she recognized her car key. She said, yeah, that's my car key. And all the rest of them, now they're all sitting over here in a pile. And the wastebasket, the bar's wastebasket is down at the end of the bar. And I start shoving all these keys down toward the wastebasket. And she jumps up out of her seat. No, 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 don't do that. You know, I said, well, what do you mean don't do it? These keys are no good whatsoever. You don't know what they're for. You know, so she says, yeah, but you know, I must need them for, I'll need them for something. You don't need them for anything. And I keep pushing them toward the wastebasket. She says, no, at least let me take them home in a bag. You know, so I got a bag, little paper bag like this. And she put all the keys in it, and I handed her her gigantic key ring with 2 little keys hanging off it. And I said, now, my dear, you have been streamlined. And she told me that when I said that to her, that she told me later on that when I said that to her, she thought 2 thoughts came into her head. She thought, who is this fucking asshole telling me I've been streamlined? And then on the other hand, she said, I need a guy like this to straighten out my life like this, you know. So she, fortunately, she opted for door number 2, and we dated for quite a while, and I wasn't going to make the same mistake that I made with Maya and get married right away. But we did eventually get married nearly 2 years later, on December 8th, 2012. But in any case, I met Ileana on January 8th, 2011, and that's where we met at the 951. And then on July 19th, 2011, was another date that will live in infamy. Graciela, Paul's girlfriend, my friend Paul Topino, his girlfriend Graciela, owned an apartment building, a small 4-plex in Key West, in which she lived in one of the apartments. One of the other tenants in that building was this guy named Angel Roman. And Angel Roman was, shall we say, less than a sterling character. Okay, he was giving her a hard time every time about paying the rent. He was constantly hitting on her, and he was just a royal pain in the ass. She went to collect the rent one day, and she gave him an eviction notice. She went to serve the eviction notice on him, and he crinkled it up and threw it back in her face while she was standing in the doorway to his apartment, and then shut the door in her face. And she came back and told Paul about it, and Paul was livid. And Paul was there, I was there, Ileana was there, Graciela was now there, the 4 of us were there. We had just had dinner, we had a glass of wine, and Paul says, let's go over there right now. So we go over, and there's the crumpled up eviction notice down on the floor outside his door. We knock on the door, he answers the door. Paul grabs the eviction notice and throws it back in his face. And Roman attacks Paul, and they start having a fight right there in his doorway. And they move into the apartment. Now, I had a baseball bat with me at the time. Paul had given me the baseball bat before we left the house. Said, take this for Gracie, for Graciela, because she might need it when she goes later on. She was going to go home, and she might need it as protection against Roman, right? So I was carrying the baseball bat for her. And so we you know, Paul and Roman are scuffling. They go into his apartment, and I go in to try to break him up. And Roman sees me. Paul is on top of Roman, and Roman sees me, and he sees I've got the bat, the baseball bat. I don't know if he thought I was going to use it, but I certainly wasn't. You know, I mean, I would never hit a guy with a baseball bat. But anyway, he grabbed up for it, and the first thing I noticed was how strong his grip was, and so I had to hold on with 2 hands to avoid him grabbing the bat out of my hands. And then And then he yelled out for a neighbor, and his neighbor, who was an elderly guy, came running up, and he saw what was going on. The neighbor grabbed the bat, and then Paul quit scuffling with Roman, then he grabbed the bat. Now there's 8 hands on the bat, right? And we're all going like this, struggling for control of the bat, and it was bordering on burlesque, okay? Nobody was really hurt. And so I said, all right, that's enough. It's over. Everybody let go of the bat. So everybody just very cautiously let go of the bat, and I took it and walked out the door. Ileana followed me, and I walked out and threw the bat in my trunk, and I got in the car and with Ileana, and we waited for Paul and Graciela to come out. And before they came out, the cops came. And the cops, to make a long story short, they arrested us, Paul and myself and Graciela, because she had attacked Roman after Ileana and I had left the building. So, but they arrested me and Paul and Graciela. And this started a 1.5-year long odyssey of hearings and one thing or another, depositions and this and that. And it just went on and on and on. Now the thing is, we were charged when we were taken to jail, and we spent the night in jail because it was late at night and we couldn't post bail, and we couldn't get the bail bondsman that late. So the next morning we got a lawyer and a bail bondsman, and we found out that we'd been charged with, each of us charged with 2 life felonies. Burglary of an occupied dwelling with assault on the occupant or something like that. Some really, far out ridiculous charge. The long and the short of it was there was no crime committed whatsoever, right? And but when we got outside and the cops had us in handcuffs, we were sitting on the curb, Paul and I and Graciela, and Paul had remembered that he still had a gun in his pocket. He carried around a little 380 caliber, small 380 caliber gun in his pocket. He had a license for it, and license to carry. It was not illegal. And but when they had frisked him, before they put the cuffs on him, they didn't find it. How they didn't find it, I don't know. But there's a gun right in his pocket. He wasn't trying to hide it. It wasn't like in his shoe or anything. It was in his pocket, and they didn't find it. So he said, he said to one of the cops, he said, hey, I got a gun in my pocket, and you didn't find it when you frisked me. So the cop, and he reaches in his pocket and pulls out the gun. Okay, so anyway, even though he never drew the gun when we were in Roman's apartment, and it was never even mentioned, he had actually forgotten about it until we were sitting there in the curb, and he could feel it bulging up in his pants. And all right, so the next morning we were charged with these ridiculous charges, and we got lawyers, and within 48 hours of getting a lawyer, the state attorney agreed to drop the charges to misdemeanor if we would agree to do 6 months in prison, 6 months in jail, county jail. And we said, fuck no, because we didn't commit any crime. So the bargaining went on and the hearings went on until December of 2012. The final bargain came in. If we pled guilty to misdemeanor trespassing, he would let us go with 45 days, which we'd be eligible for time off for good behavior, which means we could be out in 30. And I didn't like it at all, but my lawyer said, listen, this is the best you're going to get. If we go to trial, you can be sure that they're going to bring up that you had a bat and that he had a gun. And even though nobody was hurt and nobody was threatened, the jury is going to say, bat, gun, they must be guilty of something. And they're going to convict you of something. And out of all the charges that you're charged with, the least time you're going to have to do will be 4 years in state prison. And Paul will have to do 8 years because he had the gun. So, I didn't like it, but we pled guilty to misdemeanor trespassing, and we did wound up doing 30 days apiece. And I was really pissed off. We did the 30 days starting in January of 13. But now my wedding, before we did that, we had the trial where I actually entered the plea. We had that on December, I believe it was December 10th. December 8th, we got married, but we got married in Havana, Cuba. And we had this woman who arranged it for us down there, and it was just beautiful. We got married in old Havana in this apartment building. It was all run down on the outside, with collapsing stairs. I mean, it looked terrible. But you walked up in this beautiful apartment on the top floor with, it looked like something out of the Hemingway era. Just gorgeous. And it was all wood and, bright orange and yellow flowers everywhere. And they had a band up on the roof. We took a spiral staircase up to the roof, and they had a little band up there. And I don't know where they got the crowd from, but the crowd was there. And they had the lawyer came, Cuban lawyer, and married us. And the band played Bésame Mucho, and we danced to it, and that became our song. And so we had just a great time. It was a beautiful wedding, a beautiful warm night in old Havana, and I swear you could have reached out and touched the rest of the city from the rooftop that we were on. It was just beautiful, gorgeous. So, but then we had to come back the next day because my trial was Monday, at which time I pled guilty, and I agreed to turn myself in on January to do my time. So I did. I was in January. I was out 30 days later, and sometime, and I'm really bummed out by this time, right? I mean, 30 days in jail. Come on, for some bullshit thing. So I'm really bummed out. But then sometime in January 13, I received an offer to narrate an audiobook. What happened was, back in my Las Vegas days, I went to the Henderson Writers Group. They had a meeting every week in Henderson, Nevada, which is a suburb of Las Vegas. And I think it was Las Vegas Writers Group. I forget. It was one or the other. But I went to their meetings every week. And one of the things I did was get up to read excerpts from my latest novel at the time. Now, at the time, my latest novel was I was into my Miami crime trilogy. No, the Key West Nocturnes. I did the Key West trilogy of Nocturnes, and those were 3 noir novels set in Key West. And I was reading from, I think by this time, 2011, I was reading from the second novel in that series. And I eventually read from all of them. But by 2013, I got a call from a girl who attended those meetings, and she now had opened her own audiobook production company called Lyrical Lip Service. Her name was Tammy Sue Snow, and Tammy was a great girl. She opened up this audiobook production company that specialized in sort of light porn audiobooks. Okay, and she wanted to know if I wanted to narrate one of these audiobooks because she thought I had a great voice. She remembered me reading my chapters from the Las Vegas Writers Group or Henderson Writers Group. So I agreed to do it. I had never narrated an audiobook before. I didn't really know how to do it, but I went and got a microphone and some rudimentary equipment. And the audiobooks weren't very good, but hey, nobody's going to listen to this stuff, right? It was just light porn, and who listens to this stuff? And so I got paid a few bucks for it, but the more I got into it, the more I liked it, and the more I realized that I could narrate real novels here. So I went out and I invested a few bucks in a nice microphone, in a little sound system, sound mixer, and some speakers, and what they call it was those blankets that they use for movers blankets, that thick material, right? And I built a house, essentially a little house in my studio. I had a studio room in my house in Key West, and I had a little studio room, and I built a studio with aluminum poles and shaped like this, like a house, and I could walk in standing up. And I got these blankets, and it was a piece designed for this purpose. And you zip them up, and they came together, and it all worked perfectly. And it created a beautiful, perfect, soundproof, dry sound for narrating audiobooks. And that's what you want. You don't want any reverb. You don't want any echo. Not like in recording songs. You want it dry. And this was as dry as it could get. The only time I had to stop is if a motorcycle went out front or something, and so I had to stop and go over and redo that line. But to make a long story short here, I wound up narrating some 50 titles, including some pretty good books. I did novels by Jim Thompson, who was the king of noir in my opinion. I did a couple of his novels. I did a couple by David Goodis, James M. Cain. All that James M. Cain had written, Double Indemnity and The Postman Always Rings Twice. I didn't do those books, but I did a couple of others by him. And I did Clean Break by Lionel White, which was served as the basis for that great heist movie, The Killing, with Sterling Hayden, where they heisted money from a racetrack. And I did Lawrence Block. I did 4 or 5 of his. He's a great writer. He's still with us today. And I did Mickey Spillane. I did his first novel, I, the Jury, which is his biggest selling novel. Now, I got to tell you, Mickey Spillane novels, I mean, I've always liked Mickey Spillane. And his novels at that time were being narrated by Stacy Keach, who you may remember played him on TV. So, I mean, Stacy Keach, he is Mike Hammer, right? I mean, he's the guy who became Mike Hammer, just about, because he played him so well on TV. For years, he was on TV as Mike Hammer. So they got him to narrate these audiobooks. The only problem was that Stacy wanted a lot of money. So they abridged the book, it's essentially cutting it in half. Only put out half the book. They cut out a lot of it. They didn't just cut out the second half or anything. They abridged it by 50% so as to not have to pay him so much money. And he narrated all of the Mickey Spillane, Mike Hammer novels, including I, the Jury. But when I did I, the Jury, they wanted to do the unabridged version. They liked what I did. I pestered them about it. I sent them a demo. They liked what I did, and so they hired me for it. And they paid me good money for it too. Simon & Schuster. This is my first really big publishing company that I worked for. So I did about 50 titles, but I could never break into that closed society of audiobook narrators where you're on their list, where they call you. It's like with publishing. I mean, I'm still writing by now, 2013. I'm still writing, but let me tell you, I'll spoiler alert here. I wound up going nowhere as a writer. I have published all my books myself. I wound up selling maybe of all my 9 novels, I wound up selling maybe 12,000 copies, 11,000 copies, something like that total. And I couldn't get a publishing deal with a major publisher. The reason was that they insist that you be represented by an agent, and no agent would ever talk to me. He had all the clients he wanted. He didn't want to deal with anybody. He's getting these requests all the time. These query letters from wannabe writers like me, they send him the first 20 pages and it's always shit. And so he just doesn't want to read them anymore. So he throws them out without even looking at them. And he has no interest. He or she, the agent, has no interest in picking up any new writers. The only way a new writer can break in is if he has an inside contact. And that's really the only way that a new writer can break in the world of publishing, is if he has an inside contact. I knew a guy who had a novel and he did everything that I did trying to break in. He couldn't do it. And his novel was out by a major publisher. I said, well, so what'd you do? How did you get published? He said, well, I called my brother, who has a book out through Random House or something, and he got me a book deal. Nothing to it, right? Okay, so anyway, that was what happened. I couldn't get a book deal because the publishing business is closed. And now with the audiobook business, it's closed in a very similar manner. You can't break in because you're not one of the select few who've locked up probably 98% of all the significant work. And they're the ones who get called. If you're, and I mean, let me put it this way. If I'm a book publisher and I want to get an audiobook narrator, I'm going to call one of these audiobook publishing companies, and they're going to call one of their top guys. Right? Why wouldn't they? They've got for each of these audiobook publishing companies, as I don't know, maybe a dozen or 10 or 12 top guys and girls that they call for certain novels and for whatever novels they might want to publish, or nonfiction. whatever they want to do, they've got people who can do it. Why would they want to take a chance with a no-count nobody like me living down at the end of the road, recording out of some bullshit home studio, right? So I can't blame them for that. But by the same token, don't blame me for getting very discouraged at this closed society and not wanting to bang my head anymore against this brick wall. So over time, I became very disillusioned with the audiobook business. I went to a couple of their conferences in New York, and I really thought I could. There was one time when I thought I could break through, but I just couldn't. I discovered that a book called American Tabloid by James Ellroy was not available in audiobook form. And this was the only, James Ellroy is a very famous author, puts out major monster hit books, one after another. He's been doing it for years, decades. And this book came out, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago, 15 years ago. And all of Ellroy's novels had audiobooks attached to them. This one did not. And I couldn't believe it. It had no audiobook attached. So I wrote to the publisher. I said, "Look, you have no audiobook attached to this great novel. Here's my take on it." And I sent him the first 10 or 15 minutes of my narration of it. I really thought I could do it because I felt this novel. I really felt it down deep. It's my favorite novel by him, called American Tabloid. And so they said, "Well, we don't really have anything to do about picking the narrator." So I called the I went to the audiobook conference in New York that year, and I talked to the person with the audiobook publisher, the audiobook arm of whatever, I think it was Alfred A. Knopf or one of those, the audiobook arm, and I said, "Look, American Tabloid does not have an audiobook. Hire me for it, for Christ's sake. Here's my resume." I showed him all the books I was on. I said, "I can fit this like a hand in a glove. Here's a CD demo of me reading the first 10 or 15 minutes of that book. All right, please listen to it." And he promised to listen to it. And then about 6 months later, I looked and there's the audiobook out using one of the top guys. How about that? All right, well, that was very disheartening, to say the least. All right. But then in November of 2014, I'm still narrating the audiobook narration. Disheartening didn't come until maybe, I don't know, 2018 or something like that, 2019. But in any case, in November of 2014, Ileana and I decided to take a vacation. I don't know, I think it was something I ate, I don't know, excuse me. Decided to take a vacation. He said, "Where do you want to go?" He said, "Well, let's go someplace we've never been before." So I said, "Okay." And I'm looking at the map, and I remembered I just finished, I should say, doing an audiobook called Panama Takedown by a guy, by an author, Mike, oh God, I thought I'd never forget his name. Anyway, he was a very good writer, had written a lot of these action thrillers. That's what this was, an action thriller called Panama Takedown, set in Panama. And I had completed the audiobook, and I had sent it off to him, and he published it. All right, so anyway, I remembered that, and I said to Leanna, I said, "Let's go to Panama. We've never been there." And she said, "Okay, let's do it." So we got it, we packed our bags, got a ticket, and we went to Panama.